Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was
Well, as a comedian medium that I am here in Northern California, you can imagine I've had thousands of interactions with spirits and ghosts and things of that nature. In fact, I've even read people on TikTok who had posted about loss, and I've helped guide them to find things that the person wanted them to find. So, interaction with spirit or ghosts has been my entire life. But when I was a child, I saw full apparitions. And so, like a lot of spiritual children are, in fact, most kids under the age of 10 nowadays, almost all of them are all spiritualists, but I digress. So when I was 4.5, I was instructed by a spirit to go to my parents' room. And my father is a retired homicide detective. At that time, he was a police officer. And so he told me to get a ladder, to bring it to the bedroom, to pull a bullet out of the chamber, to put the bullet, get back off the ladder, put the bullet on a pillow, and put the lamp. My mom had one of those reading lamps, the metal reading lamps back in the early 80s, and put it over the bullet. And so I did as I was instructed because it was my friend. It was a spirit friend, and he was one of a couple I had, and very directive. And my dad walked in and from the party that they were having, and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I told him, I said, "This guy told me to get a ladder, to get to the closet, pull the gun down, pull the bullet out of the chamber, put the bullet on a pillow with the lamp over the bullet." I'm 4.5. I have no idea how these things work. Heat and bullets usually are not a good thing. Right behind the wall where the bullet was facing was my mom's head. Now, if you want to fast forward a little bit in my future, come to find out they weren't my parents. They, in fact, were my aunt, my uncle. And I didn't find out until I was in my late 30s, or I'm sorry, mid 30s, that I was actually adopted after having a dream with some sort of spirit that let me know I was adopted, confronting my family and them denying it. My parents are actually my aunt, my uncle. So I'm not sure who that spirit was, but I do know it was very, very detailed, very guided, very clear and concise. And yeah, it was very interesting to have that happen, capacity to happen. So there's my ghost story for you. I mean, I only have like 1,000 more. If you like to know more, let me know.
Y'all know that lady that is going viral for asking people to tell their ghost stories that are completely unbelievable, but they're actually true? Well, I tried to stitch her video, but my stitch isn't working for some reason, so I'm gonna tell y'all right here. Me and my sister and my mom, we used to stay in this house that sat right in front of a graveyard. Me and my sister's bedroom was located in the back of the house right beside the graveyard. And we used to always have a pile of leaves in our backyard because we had trees in our backyard. And y'all know how when y'all walk on leaves, it makes that sound. It sounds like you're walking on leaves. But anyways, on a Wednesday around 11 o'clock at night when everybody else was asleep, I really didn't go to sleep because I'd be up on social media. But I kept hearing like leaves rustling in the backyard, like somebody was walking on them. And you can hear the walk start off far and then get close to our back window because of the leaves. And every time that walk got close to our back window, it would be a little tiny tap on our window. And like I said, I'm the only one that's up at this point. But me, I'm just thinking it's the wind or something. So I just went back to scrolling on my social media. But I kept hearing the walk get far and then get near, get far and then get near. And it was like a walk that was slow. And every time the walk got back near to our window, the knocks on our window got louder. So I decided to get up and look out the window, but there's nobody there. And all of a sudden, the walk just stopped. And for some reason, that only happened every Wednesday around 11. So one Wednesday, my sister decided to stay up with me because she wanted to see for herself because she thought I was just paranoid that we moved beside the graveyard. So she stayed up with me until 11 o'clock and it happened again. We would hear somebody walking back and forth from our bedroom window and knocking on our bedroom window. My sister decided that we should tell our mom, and we did, but my mom took it as somebody was trying to break in our house, so she called the police. And the police searched the backyard but couldn't find nobody. But of course, me and my sister knew that they wasn't finna find nobody. But fast forward, me and my sister used to play around and we gave each other nicknames. My nickname was Sarah. I forgot her nickname. But we was the only people who knew our nicknames that we gave each other. But anyways, on a Wednesday, my sister, she had went to church and I usually go, but for some reason I didn't go that time. So that left me in the house alone because my mom was at work. And I already know what happens on Wednesdays, so I didn't even go to our bedroom. I sat right in the living room until everybody came home. But as I was sitting in the living room, I kept hearing this tiny knock on the front door. And I already had a clue of what was going on, so I didn't even go to the front door. But as I just sat and waited for the knock to stop, it actually got louder. So I just turned on a movie and started watching a movie until my sister came home. She was about to come home, and I think in about an hour anyways. Then all of a sudden, an unknown number had called my phone. And I answered it, and they just kept saying, Sarah, Sarah. You know, the nickname my sister gave me. So at this point, I thought it was my sister playing around. And I said my sister's name. I said, is this you? Like, I got excited. But after I said that, they hung up. So it was about time for my sister to come home. And when she walked through the door, and I'm like, why is you playing on my phone and you at church? She was so confused about what I was talking about. So I said, somebody had called my phone, and they was like, Sarah, Sarah, and only me and you know our nicknames. She was like, my phone is dead. My phone went dead like a few minutes after I left to go to church. So I thought she was playing. So I took her phone and I tried to turn it on, but it was actually dead. Baby, I was so scared. We moved out the house like a month later, but for real, that experience was scary.
A ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, I have video footage of this. I will share it at the end. Nobody thinks it's real. Like, it seems like it's doctored footage, but it's not. I swear on my life. Basically, both my sister and my old roommate used to work at this, like, music school daycare center for kids in the Upper East Side. The music classes would happen upstairs, but downstairs in the basement, there was this, like, daycare situation, and you had to work down there. And they both hated being down there. And I'd been down there a few times too. It is really scary. Like, you know when you just get a feeling about a place? Like, that is the basement. It was horrible. They would both, like, hear voices when their co-teacher hadn't showed up yet. Or, like, the cleaner would go downstairs and all the toys would be arranged in, like, a circle. And she'd be, like, in tears being like, are you guys playing a prank on me? I seriously, like, I don't feel safe here. The kids would all say really creepy shit. Like, they'd say, like, there's a really, like, mean guy in, like, the tunnel, like, a little play tunnel thing, or, like, there's, like, someone mean over in, like, the dark corner of the basement. So when COVID hit, obviously no one was going into the daycare. It essentially shut down. But the owners installed cameras just in case, like, anything happened while they weren't there. And it picked up the most insane shit ever. It's a minute and a half long, so here you go.
I live in Savannah, Georgia. If you know, you know, but basically they say it's the most haunted city in America. I don't know if I entirely always believed that, but I do now, and I have some good stories, so I'm gonna tell you one right now, and I might stitch this and tell more. Anyways, so my sophomore year of college, I moved into an old Victorian home with some roommates. And immediately when we got there, we all knew it was haunted. It was just like a feeling of you're not alone in this house, there are other people here, whatever. But it never felt malicious or all that scary or anything negative at all. It was like an old man energy, and you would hear him like walking on the floor late at night, and he would always go to the bathroom, and then in the bathroom you'd hear like grunting, and we kind of thought like, oh my god, it's this old man that is just so annoyed that 4 college women are living in his house and like having boys over and drinking alcohol underage, whatever. That's what we thought. And then these coins started showing up in the toilet, and they were always pennies. None of us really carried change. This was also during COVID, so like we weren't having cash on us. Like we just weren't. And we noticed that they were all from the same year. So we had this jar behind the toilet that had all of these coins from the same year. And it was just weird. But we had the plumber come check it out. No one could ever say why it was happening. It just was not something that was explainable. Whatever, right? Other weird stuff would happen in the house. Like we would all have dreams that would kind of correlate to each other, or they were the same dream. And then we would wake up with scratches, and they were not like human or pet scratches. They were like 3 scratches, and we'd all have them in the same spot. And that was really spooky ooky. And yeah, like that all happened, and that was terrible. But we all still were like, okay, it's fine, we can ignore the noises, it'll all be good. Girls, okay, so my friend AJ comes over to the house. She does not believe in ghosts. She does now, but she did not believe in ghosts at the time. And we had this trash can that was sitting across the room that had one of those lids that swivels like this. You know what I'm talking about. And it just started on its own swiveling back and forth. And AJ was like, oh my god, what the fuck is happening? Me having seen a little bit more of that kind of stuff around the house, I was like, Ethan, stop it. My boyfriend's trying to fuck with me. I'm trying to tell a story. Ethan. Anyways.
Can you pause?
No, I'm telling a story.
But dude.
Okay, anyways, we noticed the trash can kind of moving on its own back and forth. And AJ doesn't believe in ghosts, but she is like semi-spiritual, so she was like, can you just go light some incense? Like, I feel uncomfortable with this. I go in my room. I grab incense. I come outside, and I'm trying to light the incense. It was a lighter I had bought that day. It won't light. Like, whatever I do, it will not light. Oh my god, I still get chills thinking about this. And all of a sudden, I hear AJ go, Kat, help me, what's happening to me? And she's doubled over on the chair like this. And I'm like, what's going on? And she's across the room from me. The minute that me and her make eye contact, immediate, like, tunnel vision. Complete tunnel vision. The worst feeling I have ever felt in my life. Like impending doom. It basically felt like my body was saying, get the fuck out of there. Go, 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 go. Run. But AJ's sitting there and I'm over here like, oh my god, I need to run. And AJ is like toppled over and can't move. And I was a bad friend. I ran. I don't know what, like, it was such a guttural feeling of get the fuck out of here right now or else something terrible is going to happen that I've ever felt in my life. I've never felt anything like that since or before. Anyways, finally, I run downstairs. My dog runs with me. And then my roommate went upstairs and grabbed AJ. And we were on the front porch. We both experienced the same thing. We felt nauseous, like the worst feeling. I can't even describe it properly because it was terrible. And then my dog would not, basically like a circle radius on the sidewalk and the street, my dog would not walk past like that circle radius and go inside the house. We had to have a friend come over and cleanse it before my dog would even cross that like pathway. And we did not sleep there. None of us slept there that night. And we almost had a priest come to the house because it got so bad. And I forgot to mention, the next night that I slept over, from the office space that we were in, I had this super vivid nightmare of a man in like a full gimp suit crawling into my room. I still don't know if like I maybe was awake for that, but it was so vivid and it was the scariest dream I've ever had. I've never had anything like that since. And there are other stories, but there you go. That's like that's the one that keeps me up at night.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
I was actually surprised that my last ghost story got the reaction that it got because I really didn't expect people to believe me. I don't really expect people to believe this one. It's less believable than that one, but I do have witnesses. I'm gonna keep this one quick, but to tell you this story, I have to tell you about the house. There's a ton of facts I can tell you about the house, but we're gonna focus on 3. 1, you could tell it had been renovated multiple times, like it wasn't supposed to be a house, or it had been some units or some other things. It was a few other things before it was meant to be a house. 2, there were, I'm going to describe them as strange carvings somewhere in the house. I can touch on that a little bit more, but not for this story. Number 3, the next door neighbors already assumed that we moved in before we had moved in because they saw lights, despite the lights not being on, and heard music. I actually think that the neighbors were trying to tell us multiple different times that something was up and we just didn't catch it until later, but there's going to be a lot more instances of things that it didn't make sense until later. My side of the house had the most activity. There's a little den area and then French doors, bedroom. The den area always sounded like a party was going on. Like it always just sounded like a party going on in the next room. Sometimes in the middle of the night we would just look at each other like, why is it just so loud? So much was going on. But by that time we were aware. This story happens before we were really aware. The relationship that I'm in now was new at that time. So we're talking on the phone late at night, cupcaking, falling asleep on the phone, all like the cute stuff like that. At this time, what I remember was I was falling asleep. He's like on a video game, not really looking at the phone, but like he's looking at the screen playing the video game. We talk a little bit like that. This was early on in the relationship. I didn't want him to see me looking crazy, so I remember being like, I don't want to fall asleep on the phone and he sees that I'm drooling or something crazy. So I'm laying down with my head on the pillow, but I have the phone next to the pillow facing upwards. So I can see him, but he can just see darkness because it's just pointed straight up at the ceilings. The ceilings were very high, so it was just darkness. Okay, I'm going to try my best to describe this. So I'm falling asleep. For some reason, I decide to open my eyes, and when I open my eyes, I see my eye on the screen, like fully on the screen. I see him, and in the little box is my eye, and I'm looking at it. I'm like, how did I move the phone? Like I didn't even remember falling asleep, but I'm just trying to figure this out. Mind you, this is like maybe 2 seconds of me looking at it and trying to understand what I'm looking at. I think my brain just wouldn't make sense of it. And I see my eye like slowly back out of the camera and fade into darkness. At this time, he's playing the game and he looks over. I see him see it as it's backing up. But he just like looks back at the game and he continues playing the game. I'm starting to realize something is off, but it's still fairly new in the relationship and I don't want to scare him. I'd never really talked to anybody about what we had been experiencing in the house unless you like lived in the house. But I was definitely not telling him because I didn't want to scare him off. So I'm like, if he doesn't say anything, I'm not going to say anything. And I hear him say something like, that's crazy. So I remember thinking, please be talking about something on the game. So I'm like, what? I remember you saying one thing, you remember you saying another thing. 'Cause I remember you being like, I just saw your face for a second. And you remember being like...
And I said...
So you said that first?
No, I said, why are you looking at the camera like that? Then you said what you said.
Oh, okay. All right. So he says, why are you looking at the camera like that? And I'm kind of shook. So I'm just like, huh? And he's like, I just saw your face for a second. And I was like, no, you didn't. And I immediately shot straight up and took off out the room. There was actually so much about that room that I didn't talk to anybody about it. it just wasn't something that I wanted to talk to anybody about or even admit what was really happening. It wasn't until he started actually sleeping over and having his own experiences, and then later opening up to me about the experiences that he had in that house, that we started to put the story together and things started to actually fully come together. And I ended up talking to somebody who lived in that house about 30 years before I did, and she confirmed some things too. But that didn't happen until maybe 6 months after I moved out of that house. We didn't put together a lot of things until later.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, hi, this is my time to shine. Now, if you saw my Susie Stitch video, you know I had a great auntie named Ann, okay? My auntie Ann is my dad's aunt, right? So she's my great auntie, but we had an auntie named Louise. Louise is Ann's auntie, so that makes Louise my great great aunt. But she wasn't super old. It just sounds like that because my great grandma had a sister that was super young. So Auntie Louise and Auntie Ann, even though they were auntie and niece, they were super close in age, and they were super close, like locked in. They were more like sisters. They loved each other, right? Okay. So my auntie Louise died when I was about in third grade. She died from cancer. And that's a whole nother story in and of itself, because I remember after she died, I, for some reason, had like a heightened awareness of paranormal things. Like I was suddenly afraid to be in places that I've always been alone in. I was afraid to be in them alone because I was like sensing some type of heightened sense of like a different realm or something. I don't know. But my auntie Louise died, and my auntie Ann is distraught because again they're like sisters, right? So some time after she died, I'm at my auntie Ann's house, and I'm in her room by myself. My auntie Ann, I don't even know if she's home. I don't know where my cousin Missy is. I don't know where Michael is. I don't even know where my cousin little Mikey is. Like I'm just in my auntie's room alone. That's not uncommon. Like I was always in her room by myself. She had the most peaceful room in the house. So I'm in her room by myself, and I'm sitting on the bed. I'm just watching TV, hanging out, and the bed just starts aggressively shaking. I don't mean like I may have moved and like the bed may have had some residual shake. No, the bed is like aggressively shaking with me on it. I know nobody's playing a prank on me because again, I'm by myself. I would have saw anybody else in the room. My cousin Mikey was way younger than me, so there's no way he could move me and the big old bed, you know? So I knew that it was something else. I also like tested it a little bit, like I moved to make sure I wasn't tripping. Now, something about me and paranormal stuff is when it happens, I don't acknowledge it, because in my head, if I don't acknowledge it, it can't like harm me, or it like goes away, or it doesn't exist. So what did I do when that bed started aggressively shaking? I silently got up and I just slid off that bed and I just walked out the room, and I never told nobody. I didn't tell anybody. I just told my mama this story like a couple weeks ago, like for the first time. So fast forward, it's 2016, and my auntie Ann passes away, right? So we're at her house. Now, this isn't the same house where the bed was shaking. This was just the last house she ever lived in. So me and my cousin Missy, who is Auntie Ann's daughter, we just in the house, and like we're all talking and we're telling stories and stuff, because my auntie Ann was very paranormally inclined. Like so much stuff happened to her, and anything paranormal for me mostly always happened in one of her houses. Like her houses were the hub of paranormal activity. She has stories for days, and if I would have any like paranormal dream, I would ask her about it first because she was very like knowledgeable in that area. So anyway, we all sitting around in her house and just having memories and telling stories. So I tell the story about me sitting in my auntie Ann's room. And do you know, before I could finish that story, my cousin Missy goes, and the bed started shaking, didn't it? And I was like, how did you know that? What? Like, how did you know? And she was like, after Auntie Louise died, my mama took one of her leather bound journals and she kept it, and she would keep it underneath the bed, underneath the mattress. And ever since she would put that leather bound journal underneath the mattress, she was like, she don't know what it was, but the bed would just shake like that. And this is the early 2000s. Like, there wasn't any toy or device that was doing that. So she was just like, yeah, ever since she put that journal under there, the bed would just shake all the time. So I don't know what was in that journal. I don't know what was so special about it. I don't know if it was like witchy or what, but I just thought that was so crazy, and I felt so validated because I never told nobody that story because I didn't want to sound crazy. So
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely.
If you scare easily, go ahead and exit right now. When my grandmother was in hospice, she hospiced under the care of my mom and my aunt in this home. As it got closer to the end, my grandma would kind of swat and be like, do you see them? Do you see them? They're just flying all around me. They're flying all around me. She would also say that she sees a man in the corner. One day my mother was in the bathroom doing her hair and my aunt was going to the store. While my mom was in the bathroom doing her hair, she felt a huge gust of wind, as if like somebody was like walking by and walking through our hallway, and they're walking fast and like with a purpose, like startled my mom. Then she peeked outside the door and she's calling for my aunt. She's like, Pat, is that you? And it wasn't my aunt. And then it happened again and she sees somebody like walking by, and my mom was like, what the heck is going on? My mom just gets this really weird feeling and she goes into my grandma's room and she's like, hey mom, are you okay? And my grandma was like, did you see him? And my mom was like, yeah mom, I saw him. She starts speaking to it, starts saying, hey, I think I know who you are. We're not ready for her to go. And my mom said that it was a cloaked figure, like a pale cloaked figure with like a button up shirt with a high collar, like ruffled high collar up to here, ruffles on the sleeves, and like a hat that Abraham Lincoln used to wear, like a top hat. Like a few days passed. My grandma is watching Judge Judy because that's what my grandma loved, Judge Judy. And my mom is in there and Judge Judy had just gone off, and my mom goes in there and she's like, hey mommy, ask my grandma if she wants to watch the Today Show now because Gladys Knight and the Pips are going to be performing. And my mom has her back turned to my grandma, and my grandma's back here laying down. And my mom says, she's like, hey mom, do you want to watch the Today Show? Gladys Knight and the Pips are on. And my grandma said, no, he's here. And my mom says, who's here, mom? And when my mom turned around, my grandma had passed. Like, my grandma was dead. She was gone. She said, no, he's here. And she was gone. It was the angel of death. The angel of death came and took her soul. Yeah, he's here. Yeah.
Do I have a story for you? This scared the absolute shit out of me. And like ghost things, paranormal things don't scare me ever. So, yeah. We had a party for my boyfriend and he had his friends over. We were playing beer pong. We were all in the living room. And as we're playing, we hear like something being thrown in the kitchen, which was not near us and none of us were in there prior to that. We go to check and the garbage can lid is thrown across the kitchen floor out of nowhere. So that was already like okay, we're gonna pretend that did not just happen and continue our game. As we're playing the game, we decorated prior and we had balloons just hanging like from the ceiling, helium filled, whatever. And as we're playing, we just see one of the balloons start coming like straight down. And I'm like, okay, maybe it's the air, maybe it's the wind, like what is it? None of the other balloons are moving, just this one singular balloon just coming straight down as if some little whatever was fucking pulling it down. So now we're just kind of like, don't really like that. His mom starts praying because she's like, whatever the fuck this is, like we need it out of the house. And as she's praying, this balloon goes down even further and starts traveling to the front door. The minute she literally said, like, please leave, it exited the house. And the two doors, there's like a screen door and there's the wooden door, both slammed behind it as if it was like, all right, I'm taking this balloon. Fuck you. I'm leaving. Slams the door shut. No one's filming. Like, everyone's just in the moment, like, scared to fucking move, like, not believing what's in front of our own eyeballs at that moment. I believe in all the paranormal shit. My mom passed away a few years ago, so I'm always getting signs from her, but it just wasn't one of those moments. It was not. So we're all kind of just like freaking the fuck out just a little bit. We're all talking about it, like still kind of hyped up, like what the fuck was that? That there's no way that just happened, like just freaking out in the moment. And my boyfriend's friends were like sitting on the couch and we all heard like a on the front door and we're like, oh, okay, like someone's here. And as they go to check the door and open it, nobody's there. Nobody's there. And the screen door was now like open. So something opened the screen door and knocked like literally fucking on the wooden door. And the minute they opened the door, there was nobody there. And all of us were just like, okay, there is absolutely no fucking way that just happened. That literally, like I said, I've always believed in stuff like that, but that absolutely like just happening in front of me changed my mind on that shit forever, and it is so fucking real.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
All right. So, like a lot of people on this trend, this is not my usual content, but I think it's a cool opportunity for all of us to tell our story, and I thought I would share mine. So in 2011, I was a camp counselor at a Christian sports camp in Golden, Missouri, and I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. It was just supposed to be a summer job in between semesters, and wow, it actually kind of changed my life. So this camp was broken up into two major demographics. The way they marketed their camp, one of their camps was marketed more towards wealthy white campers, and the other camp, which is the one I worked at, was more geared towards at-risk communities, Black and Latinx individuals, high school kids. And so for me, I felt that that was going to be the most impactful. I didn't really want to have a job that didn't mean anything to me. I wanted to do something bigger than myself. And at the time, I was super immersed in church, and I thought this was a cool opportunity to share my gifts and maybe be a mentor for some of these kids. So historically, some of these campers that get brought in, and they're brought in from all across the country. Some of them have gotten violent. There's been contraband brought in. So we had to have a week of preparation. Just the leaders, the camp counselors, and the directors would prepare the counselors for summer camp. It was broken up into 3 sessions, the camp itself. The training was just a week in May. And there were sessions from June all the way to end of July. So I was the second session and the third session, which was 6 weeks long. During the training, mind you, it was very military style. We would have to wake up at a certain time. We would have to have our cabins completely cleaned before we left. When the campers did come, we were told that we had to have them in straight lines and they had to sit down. It was just very drill sergeant, which I didn't know it was going to be that. They didn't market it for it to be that. So that was my first surprise. During the training, I was pulled aside and was told by the directors and a couple leaders, hey, David, you fit the body build and you fit the fact that you don't have any tattoos. we need you to play Jesus in this reenactment that we do called Crosstalk every fourth day. So as they're explaining to me what Crosstalk was, they had a laptop and they opened it up and they showed me scenes of the Passion of the Christ, which I had never seen because I knew it would be too disturbing for me to see. So the fact that they just kind of opened up the laptop and just showed me without my consent was my first big red flag. They walked me through what the reenactment would be like. It didn't seem like I could get hurt. It didn't seem dangerous in any way. At the time, I was very immersed in my church. I was raised in a Christian household growing up. So in a way, this felt like an honor to be selected. But that night, and maybe it was a couple nights after, I just felt super uneasy. I remember laying in bed, and the way my bed was, it was bunk bed style cabins in the boondocks, well, I guess the Ozarks of Golden, Missouri. And so it's easy to get spooked out there at night, but it just felt like someone was watching me. Like the way when I was laying, I could see the screen door to outside, and it just felt like someone was standing there watching me. And that unease continued after the training. And when I got home, I would have these horrible nightmares. I had a nightmare where, and I'll never forget, we were all getting given letters written by Satan. And on the front of the letter, it was a tree. And at the top of the tree was Satan. At the bottom of the tree was God. And on the back of the letter, it was Satan's name written all over it. And as soon as I read the letter, I was instantly back at camp at night. And I could see a building kind of in the distance. And I heard someone coming out of that building. And out loud in my dream, I said, "You know what Satan's doing, but you still let him in." And I just had awful dreams, sort of like that. Just kind of evil type of dreams. One of them, there was blood written above my room that said, "Satan's in your room." So it got to a point where I was like, I need somebody to pray over me. So I had someone from my congregation pray over me. I was around my family. It was about a week and a half until I would go back to Golden, Missouri. So it did kind of settle down after people prayed over me, after I kind of spoke about how uneasy I was feeling. It went away, but then it definitely came back when I got back to the camp. So I got there a day before my 6-week session started, and I was talking to some of the other leaders, trying to get the lay of the land, tips, tricks of the trade, all that. And some of the leaders were saying to me that campers were complaining about shadowy figures standing above their bed at night. And I was like, okay, like, whatever, dude. Like, okay, kids being kids, or like you're just trying to scare me. Didn't think anything of it. So I jumped into my sessions, and the first crosstalk happened, and I was super nervous, and it was a lot more intense than I thought, a lot more intense than the leaders and directors made it seem. And as the weeks progressed, it got more and more violent. I'll never forget, there was one week that the director came up to us backstage and said, "We really need to sell it tonight." And that's when I believe I got a concussion, because I was hit so hard. And the people who were supposed to be the guards in the reenactment, they were bodybuilders, they were ex-football players, they were big dudes. So it was already just, it wasn't right. So as each week passes, we get different groups of kids each week, mind you. So as each week passes, I'm starting to feel just heavier and heavier. Especially around the fourth day, I would be in tears right after having to do this reenactment. I kind of chalked it up to just having spiritual experience. I think it was a lot deeper than that. And so like my mood was very heightened. I felt almost like a veil was being lifted. I say that to say there was this one time, and it was during 4th of July. The camp threw a party, a 4th of July party. and a kid had split his pants. Something stupid. So I had to walk this kid up back to his cabin to make sure that he, changed his pants. We couldn't keep these kids couldn't be alone. That was part of our rules, so they had to be accompanied when certain things like this happen. So I was like, all right, run into the cabin. I'll wait outside. So as we're walking up to the cabin, we hear what sounds like a parade in the distance. We can't see anything, but we hear, to me, it sounded like drums, like percussion. And then it sounded like a chainsaw. And then it sounded like drums again. So I couldn't figure out what that sound was. And as I'm thinking about what that sound was, not too far in front of us was a patch of trees. And we both stop in our tracks because we see this figure, this person walking amongst the trees, walks behind a tree and disappears, completely disappears. Now, at the time, I was like, okay, there's someone here that shouldn't be here. So I went into the patch of trees to look to see who it was, what was going on, and no one was there. Nobody was there. There was no sign of anybody there. The kid next to me saw it. I saw it. He ran inside, changed his pants, came out, and I told the directors about this, and I described the person. It was someone just, wearing jeans. It seemed like a white man, a older white man, basic looking. And the directors say, yeah, we saw him before when we were trying to build this place. He came up to us, and part 2 is coming up.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
All right. So, like a lot of people on this trend, this is not my usual content, but I think it's a cool opportunity for all of us to tell our story, and I thought I would share mine. So in 2011, I was a camp counselor at a Christian sports camp in Golden, Missouri, and I really didn't know what I was getting myself into. It was just supposed to be a summer job in between semesters, and it actually kind of changed my life. So this camp was broken up into 2 major demographics. The way they marketed their camp, one of their camps was marketed more towards wealthy white campers, and the other camp, which is the one I worked at, was more geared towards at-risk communities, Black and Latinx individuals, high school kids. And so for me, I felt that was going to be the most impactful. I didn't really want to have a job that didn't mean anything to me. I wanted to do something bigger than myself. And at the time, I was super immersed in church, and I thought this was a cool opportunity to share my gifts and maybe be a mentor for some of these kids. So historically, some of these campers that get brought in, and they're brought in from all across the country, some of them have gotten violent. There's been contraband brought in. So we had to have a week of preparation. Just the leaders, the camp counselors, and the directors would prepare the counselors for summer camp. It was broken up into 3 sessions, the camp itself. The training was just a week in May, and there were sessions from June all the way to end of July. So I was the 2nd session and the 3rd session, which was 6 weeks long. During the training, mind you, it was very military style. We would have to wake up at a certain time. We would have to have our cabins completely cleaned before we left. When the campers did come, we were told that we had to have them in straight lines, and they had to sit down. It was just very drill sergeant, which I didn't know it was going to be that. They didn't market it for it to be that, so that was my first surprise. During the training, I was pulled aside and was told by the directors and a couple leaders, hey, David, you fit the body build, and you fit the fact that you don't have any tattoos, we need you to play Jesus in this reenactment that we do called Crosstalk every fourth day. So as they're explaining to me what Crosstalk was, they had a laptop and they opened it up and they showed me scenes of the Passion of the Christ, which I had never seen because I knew it would be too disturbing for me to see. So the fact that they just kind of opened up the laptop and just showed me without my consent was my first big red flag. They walked me through what the reenactment would be like. It didn't seem like I could get hurt. It didn't seem dangerous in any way. At the time, I was very immersed in my church. I was raised in a Christian household growing up. So in a way, this felt like an honor to be selected. But that night, and maybe it was a couple nights after, I just felt super uneasy. I remember laying in bed, and the way my bed was, it was bunk bed style cabins in the boondocks, well, I guess the Ozarks of Golden, Missouri. And so it's easy to get spooked out there at night, but it just felt like someone was watching me. Like the way when I was laying, I could see the screen door to outside, and it just felt like someone was standing there watching me. And that unease continued after the training. And when I got home, I would have these horrible nightmares. I had a nightmare where, and I'll never forget, we were all getting given letters written by Satan. And on the front of the letter, it was a tree. And at the top of the tree was Satan. At the bottom of the tree was God. And on the back of the letter, it was Satan's name written all over it. And as soon as I read the letter, I was instantly back at camp at night. And I could see a building kind of in the distance. And I heard someone coming out of that building. And out loud in my dream, I said, "You know what Satan's doing, but you still let him in." And I just had awful dreams, sort of like that. Just kind of evil type of dreams. One of them, there was blood written above my room that said, "Satan's in your room." So it got to a point where I was like, I need somebody to pray over me. So I had someone from my congregation pray over me. I was around my family. It was about a week and a half until I would go back to Golden, Missouri. So it did kind of settle down after people prayed over me, after I kind of spoke about how uneasy I was feeling. It went away, but then it definitely came back when I got back to the camp. So I got there a day before my 6-week session started, and I was talking to some of the other leaders, trying to get the lay of the land, tips, tricks of the trade, all that. And some of the leaders were saying to me that campers were complaining about shadowy figures standing above their bed at night. And I was like, okay, like, whatever, dude. Like, okay, kids being kids, or like you're just trying to scare me. Didn't think anything of it. So I jumped into my sessions, and the first crosstalk happened, and I was super nervous, and it was a lot more intense than I thought, a lot more intense than the leaders and directors made it seem. And as the weeks progressed, it got more and more violent. I'll never forget, there was one week that the director came up to us backstage and said, "We really need to sell it tonight." And that's when I believe I got a concussion, because I was hit so hard. And the people who were supposed to be the guards in the reenactment, they were bodybuilders, they were ex-football players, they were big dudes. So it was already just, it wasn't right. So as each week passes, we get different groups of kids each week, mind you. So as each week passes, I'm starting to feel just heavier and heavier, especially around the fourth day. I would be in tears right after having to do this reenactment. I kind of chalked it up to just, having spiritual experience. I think it was a lot deeper than that. And so like my mood was very heightened. I felt almost like a veil was being lifted. I say that to say there was this one time, and it was during 4th of July. The camp threw a party, a 4th of July party, and a kid had split his pants. Something stupid. So I had to walk this kid up back to his cabin to make sure that he, changed his pants. We couldn't keep these kids couldn't be alone. That was part of our rules, so they had to be accompanied when certain things like this happen. So I was like, all right, run into the cabin. I'll wait outside. So as we're walking up to the cabin, we hear what sounds like a parade in the distance. We can't see anything, but we hear, to me, it sounded like drums, like percussion. And then it sounded like a chainsaw, and then it sounded like drums again. So I couldn't figure out what that sound was. And as I'm thinking about what that sound was, not too far in front of us was a patch of trees. And we both stop in our tracks because we see this figure, this person walking amongst the trees, walks behind a tree, and disappears, completely disappears. Now, at the time, I was like, okay, there's someone here that shouldn't be here. So I went into the patch of trees to look to see who it was, what was going on, and no one was there. Nobody was there. There was no sign of anybody there. The kid next to me saw it. I saw it. He ran inside, changed his pants, came out, and I told the directors about this, and I described the person. It was someone just, wearing jeans. It seemed like a white man, a older white man, basic looking. And the directors say, yeah, we saw him before when we were trying to build this place. He came up to us, and part 2 is coming up.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
I swore I'd never be on TikTok, put my face on TikTok. I just have it to watch videos. I'm not a content creator, so, but I had to jump on this trend because it's just so up my alley. So let me preface by saying I'm a behavioral scientist. I am very science-minded. I'm still not totally convinced that ghosts are like departed souls or whatever. There may be a physics explanation, but I definitely believe that there are things that happen that we can't explain. And one of those things happened when I was around 14 years old and continues until today, as far as I know. So when before I was born, my parents moved into this 100-year-old tiny little farmhouse in rural Missouri. Shortly thereafter had me, and then had my brother 5 years later. Around the time that I was like 13, 14, they started realizing that we had outgrown that space, and so started building a 4-bedroom house on the same property just down across the field. Because my family have always been like mostly manual laborers, and have always done like, work with their hands essentially. My family built the house themselves. And so it was mostly my dad, my grandparents, some uncles and cousins that came over to help. And pretty much as soon as the walls started going up, things started happening. Nothing ever happened in the old farmhouse, but as soon as they started building the new one, stuff started going on down there. And even whenever they were building it, as soon as the walls went up, my cousin started refusing to come and stay working on the house after dark. Because they all had jobs, they would do the work before and after work, and so sometimes into the night, and he would leave as soon as it started getting dark, because he just said there's something wrong with the house, something's weird. They kept hearing banging, things would get moved, and we all just kind of thought he was being a sissy and he was just dumb. But turns out he could have been onto something. So I have so many stories of, just little things, like things being moved, things going missing, and then turning up weeks later in the same place that they had gone missing from, things like that. But I'm pretty much just going to tell the big heavy hitters, and I might do a part 2 or something later. So as soon as we moved in, my brother didn't really love his room. We had all picked out our own bed and bedding, and even had murals and stuff on the walls, and so it was just really weird that he never wanted to spend any time there. He never wanted to sleep in there. And so, we had kind of just chalked it up to like, it's a change. It's, he's kind of a sensitive kid. Maybe he's just like kind of struggling with that transition. But he started sleeping on the couch in the living room, would never sleep in his room. And so one night, after he had done this, for a few weeks, one night, and at this point he's 9 or 10, so like way beyond the point of like wanting to do this. He asked me if he could sleep in my room with me. I'm like, yeah, I guess, like, yeah, that's fine, like, sure. So that night, and I'm trying to like talk to him, I'm like, big sister, like, is it just like, do you miss the old house? Like, what's going on? And so he ends up telling me that the night before, when he was asleep on the couch, he thought he saw something. And so he sits up on the couch and like looks down the hallway, and he sees a little girl walking down the hallway and turning like toward my room. And so he wanted to stay in there with me because he was scared, but he was also scared for me that like something was going to happen to me. And at this point, again, I'm like complete skeptic. I don't believe in ghosts. I like adamantly, there are no monsters under the bed kind of thing. I've always kind of been that way. But I'm just trying to like reassure him, like, it's gonna be fine. It's fine. You're okay. Like, I'll keep you safe. Yada, yada, yada. So then literally 10, 15 minutes later, as we're having this conversation, he points out the window and I turn and look, and there's a little girl sitting in the tree right outside my window. It was one of the most surreal, weirdest experiences of my life. And as you like, if you think about like ghosts in like movies and stuff, how they're kind of like always glowing, like just like casting light around them, almost like a candle, or like a ball of light. It wasn't like that. She wasn't solid, but she she was light enough that I could see her, even though it was dark outside, but like she wasn't casting light around her at all. And it wasn't like you immediately like look toward the light because she was so bright. It was just like she was light enough that I could see the shape of her face and like the buttons on her dress and like things like that. Anyway, like we saw her for like a split second and immediately started screaming. So my parents run in. Of course, by the time they get there, like she's gone. Like at some point she has just like evaporated. And my mom, who is to this day like very Christian, evangelical, super religious, starts kind of trying to explain it away. Like, oh, you guys, like, it's just been such a big change. And like, it was probably just the leaves and the wind and, and all of this stuff. And my dad is just quiet. He just doesn't say really anything. But before they leave, he just says like, it's going to be okay. You're going to be fine. And leaves. So the next day, I'm talking to my dad. I'm like, at this point, like I am 14, maybe close to 15 years old. Like I'm trying to have this like rational discussion with him where I convince him that like I'm not crazy. Like we both saw it. It was absolutely real. Like, why don't you believe me, kind of thing. And he just looks at me and he says, I do believe you. I know it's real because I've seen her too.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
So I was dating somebody who I knew in my gut wasn't right for me. And when I say gut, sometimes I say like gut. Gut is our guardian angel, right? Or ghost in this case. And so one day I was on my way over to his house and I definitely had that ghost with me in the car and it was telling me not to go, but I kept ignoring it anyway. I got into his house and, we were hanging out for a little bit. One thing led to another. We went upstairs, about to go have some fun and do the damn thing. And I heard clear as day in my ear, he's filming you. And I was directed to my right and I found an iPhone recording us in the corner of his bookshelf case. Grabbed the phone and left. That's a ghost.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was 8.
So I was babysitting for the first time this little girl. She's 3 years old. And it was going to be at night because her mom works nights. So I'd be with her till like 2 a.m. And her mom told me, she's not sleeping lately. I don't know what's going on. She won't go in her room. She won't lay down. Whatever you need to do to get her to sleep, just try. I said, all right, we'll figure it out. So it was late and there was no sign of her wanting to go in her room. I said, let's go lay down in your room. You know, it was 11. I think 11:30. So let's go lay down in your room. She goes, no. I said, why? And she goes, the baby's crying. And I said, I have no idea. You know, I didn't think anything of it. I thought maybe it was like a TV show she was talking about. And I said, no, let's go lay down in your room. So we went in her room and she goes, the baby's crying. And so at this point, I'm like, what baby? What baby? And she pointed up to the ceiling, at the corner of the ceiling, and she said, right there. He's crying. He's sad. She said, I don't want him to cry. And I was like, I am freaked out. So first thing that happened. And I said, okay, let's leave. Let's go to your mom's room. So we went to her mom's room. And she said, the tall man's in here. And I, full body goosebumps. I said, what tall man? Where? And she pointed to her closet and she goes, he lives there. Tall man. And I said, we're not staying in here. We're going into the living room. So we sat down in the living room and there's a couch. Behind me is a big window. So I think I had the news on. I don't know what I was watching. She's sitting there and she stood up and looked behind me and screamed. She screamed. And I was so like, I like thought someone was outside. So I looked. I swear to God, I saw the tallest shadow. It was like a shadow figure, tall. And it looked like it just swooped past the window. And it looked like he was wearing a wide brimmed hat. And I was so freaked out. And she said, Hat Man, as soon as it happened. Hat Man, Hat Man, Hat. And my instinct is to run outside, but I went outside, so I didn't run outside. And so I honestly think I just stayed in the kitchen. I was like in the kitchen. And I was like, your mom's gonna be home soon. I'm just gonna stay here, okay? And the mom got home and I was like, yeah, she's not sleeping. I gotta go. I was so scared. So scared. I never went back. They never asked me to come back. I never went back, and they moved shortly after. We lost contact, so I don't know how they're doing. I hope they're okay. But that was the scariest thing that ever happened to me. Talking about it now gives me tears in my eyes because it just freaks me out so bad.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
All right, so this happened. I was in the 2nd grade, and I remember it because we moved not too long after this incident. Now, we moved into this house, and there was always like crazy weird things happening, lights turning on and off. We had a little radio we'd keep in our bedroom, and it was constantly getting the channel change. Like, it was, because you had to turn the knob to change the channel on the radio, and the radio stations was constantly being changed. Just weird stuff like this. So this one night, the way the house was set up, my bedroom was all the way at the end of the hall. And if I laid in my bed, I could look directly down the hallway. Then there was my mom's room and my brother's room. And my brother's room was directly across from the hallway. So from my brother's bed, they could look directly into the bathroom. So I'm sleeping one night and I hear giggling. So I wake up and there was this little white girl. She had blonde curly hair, like her hair was like really, really curly. And she had on this pink and white dress. And the bottom of the dress had the white lace on it. And she was just standing in my doorway.
looking at me. Now my door is open because I never really slept with my door shut. So as I'm looking at her, she's looking at me, she starts giggling. She turns around and this little girl starts skipping down the hallway. And as she gets right in front of the bathroom, like something big, hairy, I don't know what it was, just came out of the bathroom, grabbed her into the bathroom. I am petrified. I am laying in my bed and I cannot move. Like, I am completely terrified at this point. And I remember just laying there for the rest of the night. So as it got daylight outside, there's more light, all my family getting up, I was closer to my brother number 2. So when I got a moment alone with brother number 2, I told him what I had saw. And after I told him, he grabbed me and he said, "You got to come with me." So brother 2 takes me to brother 1. Because apparently earlier that day, brother number 1 told brother number 2 that when he was laying in his bed that night, he heard giggling. And as he looked out of his bedroom door, he saw a little white girl with curly blonde hair, a pink and white dress, and she was skipping past his doorway. And just as she got to the bathroom, he said he saw this big hairy monster come out the bathroom, grab her, and then run into the bathroom wall. So I didn't talk to brother number 1 before this. He told brother number 2 before I told brother number 2. So me and brother number 1 never communicated our stories to each other until this moment. So we ended up talking to our mom, telling our mom the whole time all this crazy stuff was happening in this house. My mom was always like, "Oh, it's fine, it doesn't mean anything," and playing it off as if she didn't believe us and we were just like kids making up stories. So not too long after the little white girl incident, we was up here and we heard banging, like loud footsteps coming from our attic. Now the weird part about that, okay, so the bathroom door was right next to the attic door, but when you went up into the attic didn't have a floor. It was just rafters. So it just had, the boards there, but there wasn't a floor. But you distinctly heard loud footsteps, boom, 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 like somebody is just stomping across the attic floor. My mom actually heard this at the time. And she went over and she started banging on the attic door. And she started yelling and she was like, "Be quiet up there." And just as she said that, the noises stopped. And then you heard running. Like you heard somebody running across the fucking attic floor and start running down the stairs. Now, as we hear somebody running down the stairs, my mom goes and she throws herself up against the attic door. And just as she pushed her weight against that attic door, something hit it from the other side. It was like boom, to where she actually like came off a little bit, like So she is like putting all her weight against the attic door, and she's calling for my stepdad, and she's telling him, "Hey, come over here. We putting a lock on this door." So as she's holding her body weight against the door, they just had a spare lock, like everything. And they put a latch on the door and they put a lock on that door, and we moved out of that house 3 days later. So yeah.
I don't know if y'all have been seeing this creator's video on your For You page, but she's all over mine. She made a video saying, "Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. If you know me, you know I have a lot of those and I come with receipts." So my mom, my dad, my sister, and her newborn baby had just moved to this small town in the Midwest called Liberty, Missouri. Now this town is very old. It has a lot of history. The house that we bought and we moved into, I don't think was haunted, but I think it was more so the land itself that was haunted. To kind of give y'all an idea of just how old this town was and how much history it has, this building that's behind me is called the Oddfellows home. This building was built, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think in 1893. So very, very old. It's been a hospital for the mentally ill, the physically ill. I think at one point it was an orphanage. So this town has been around for a while.
for the like entirety of my mom's life, she's always had a lot of supernatural experiences. She's been very like intuitive. So right when we moved in, she kind of sensed that there was some sort of like entity or spirit, and we always thought it was kind of a childlike spirit just because it was more so playful, and it just played a lot of pranks. It never really like threatened us or our safety or anything. Now, as mentioned before, it was my dad, my mom, my sister, and her newborn baby living in this house, and the most activity happened in this room, which was the baby's like nursery room. The doors in this room would always open and close by themselves. My niece would wake up in the middle of the night or like really early in the morning around 3 or 4. She would stand up in her crib looking out over the room, yelling into space, yelling no, yelling stay back. I'll show those videos in a second. I would say the creepiest part about this room was that in this closet, which the door never stayed shut in this room, in this closet there's like a little crawl space that was kind of locked in. Here's a better picture of the door. You can actually see in this photo that this door is like cracked open, and that's like how it always stayed. No matter how many times you shut it, that door would always open back up. Now, this bedroom was actually a Jack and Jill bedroom, so there was a bathroom connecting these 2 bedrooms that were right next to each other, and this bathroom is probably where the most creepy thing ever happened. My sister got out of the shower and saw this on the mirror. Now, mind you, she was the only person in the house. My dad was visiting family in Iowa. My mom was on a work trip. I was down here in Texas with my husband. And at this point, she had been alone in the house, just her and her newborn, for a week. This was the last day of the week that she was alone. And she takes a shower, and she gets out of the shower, and she sees this on the mirror. Mind you, we have lived in the house for like a year at this point. We've taken so many showers. That mirror has fogged up so many times. Never ever has a message been written on this mirror. Now, this is kind of where we were validated in the fact that we thought this was a childlike spirit. Not only did it play pranks and kind of mess with us like that, but we think that this spells out Anna Boanna, and then there's 3 little stars. You can't really see that one, but there's 3 little stars underneath it, and this just really confirms that like we were right in assuming that this might be a kid. As mentioned previously, my niece would, in the middle of the night, stand up in her crib and look out over the room and yell things like no and stay back, and I will show you guys that right now. Another thing that would happen a lot in that nursery was we would see a lot of orbs, and I know orbs are controversial, okay? A lot of people are like, oh, they're bugs, or oh, it's dust, or oh, it's just light from the camera and reflections and refractions or whatever, but just like the way that these were moving, like they had to be orbs. They had to be orbs, and I'll show you that now. The last video that I'll show you is me walking in the bedroom. As I mentioned previously, doors would open and shut by themselves all the time. Now, I understand when you walk through like a doorway, sometimes the door will close behind you because of the wind, but usually it needs momentum for the door to completely latch. The video I'm about to show you, I walked through the doorway at a normal speed, like I'm not running through the doorway, and you can see it slowly shut, and the door completely latches. No way that door completely latches with as slow as it was going. Watch.
completely latched.
So to wrap up the video, I'll tell 2 more stories. I don't have any videos or pictures from these, but I'm pretty sure y'all can take my word for it. I'm obviously not lying here. My first ever encounter with this spirit entity, whatever it was when we had just moved in. It was late 2019. I was just diagnosed with ovarian cancer, so I actually just had a pretty big surgery, and I was on some pretty hefty pain pills. I was on hydrocodone, so initially I thought I was just seeing things, but I'm upstairs, I'm in the Jack and Jill bedrooms. The bedroom that I'm in, the light is off. The bathroom that is connected to the bedroom, that light is on. So I wake up and I look in the doorframe of the bathroom and I see a figure. And it's nobody in my family. It doesn't look like anybody in my family. I see the figure, I get up and leave the room. I don't stare at it, I don't interact with it, I just get up and I leave. I go downstairs. All my family is downstairs. Nobody was up there. And then lastly, probably the craziest thing. So it was just my mom, my sister, and the newborn. It was around the winter time and there was about to be a big snowstorm. So my mom and my sister left the house to go run a bunch of errands before all the roads closed. They get back home with all the groceries and they take out the groceries in the car and they take all the bags and place them on the counter. Now, mind you, no food is put away, no groceries are put away. They just simply put the bags full of food on the counters and they quickly realize that they forgot something. So they leave, they come back with the thing they forgot. When they walk in the front door, they see all of the food, all of the groceries that they brought in and kept in the bags are out of the bags, just haphazardly placed around the kitchen in the most random spots. And probably the weirdest, tiniest creepy detail of the whole story is the twist ties on loaves of bread that was taken off of the bread and it was placed on the edge of the counter, sitting up just like a little person with its little legs crossed. So those are probably the craziest stories that I have from that house. Like I said before, if you know me, if I know you, you've probably heard these stories because I literally tell them every chance I get.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
I've got one for you. So when I was 19, I moved into this house after a breakup and I found this room on Facebook Marketplace. This girl was selling her room or whatever, subleasing it, and it was, I think, $250 a month, and I was like, yeah, let's go. So I moved into this place and it is a very old home. It was made out of local stone and it was on this block that all the houses were made out of local stone, and if they weren't made out of local stone, they would not still be standing. I'll just say that. They're very old. So this house had been converted into separate apartments, and I was living in a room that you had to walk through a bathroom to get to, and this room is also connected to another bedroom, but we just put furniture in front of it, so it kind of felt like a bedroom. So that's where I was staying, and the first night that I was sleeping there, I was woken up out of a dream, don't know what I was dreaming about, and I saw this woman just hovering over me, looking at me. And I looked at her for a few seconds, and when she realized I was looking at her, I just saw her eyes get really wide, and she looked nervous, and she disappeared. And I've never really given that a lot of credit because I was waking up out of a dream, sometimes you just see things, I don't know. But then the next day when I was leaving to go do something else, I was opening my door, going through the bathroom to get out of the house. I swore that I saw someone crouched in the corner of the shower. And I thought that was weird. But because the night before and how I was that was probably just a dream. I'm probably just paranoid right now. I'm not going to give it any credit. So time goes on, right? And I get a cat. Love the little thing. She's precious. And it gets to a point where, I'm 19. I'm full-time college student. Her food was more expensive than mine, and I couldn't afford to keep her anymore. So one of my friends took her, and I noticed as soon as she was gone that things started to get a little hairy. From that day forward till I moved out, every single day something happened. Didn't matter if it was daytime, nighttime, or anything. But that little figure that I had seen crouched in the shower was a little boy. And he was very upset that my cat was not there anymore. So what did he do? He terrorized me. Like, it got to the point where I had to rearrange my room so when I would wake up and roll over in the middle of the night, I wouldn't see him, because he would stand in the corner where I had my cat's stuff, as if like protesting that she was gone. And that was every single night from that point on. During the day, I would have hangers and clothes fly out of my closet. Did not matter. Door would open, closet and clothes would just fall out. And it became a normal thing, you know, like I would see him and I wouldn't think twice about it, because I didn't want to engage. I didn't want to encourage it. So what I would do is I wouldn't say anything. If he was really scaring me, I'd go to someone else's house. I just dip out, because you know, like child spirits, you don't really know if it's a real child or not. I think this was a real child because he was just throwing tantrums and taking it all out on me. The scariest thing that ever happened with him, though, was I was doing laundry one day. I guess my cat had probably been gone for a couple months now, and I'd become adjusted to seeing him. It wasn't anything new. And I was folding my laundry on my bed, and I watched him crawl out of my closet, look at me, and crawl underneath my bed. It actually makes me sick to my stomach, even thinking about it, because I don't know if you've seen any scary movie. It was horrifying. So yeah, I dipped. I didn't come back for like 2 days because that was horrifying. And before I left, though, I did get on my hands and knees and look under the bed to see if he was there. One of the bravest moments of my life, he wasn't. And at that point, I was already done. You know, I didn't care that I didn't see him. I was done. So, I mean, my laundry was clean. It didn't matter. I dipped. And from that point on, it never got that bad again. But he was almost always in the shower when I would be leaving, and the way that our bathroom is set up, like the mirror faced the shower, and there would be times where like I would be getting ready, I'm crying, I would be getting ready, and I would see his little stinking head pop up in the mirror, and I had to start sleeping with a face mask, because I would roll over in the middle of the night and he would either be in the corner of my cat's stuff, or he would be at the end of my bed, or he'd be in another corner. Like it was something straight out of Insidious. And I'd say that's one of the worst ghost stories I have at that house, definitely, because I never saw that woman again. There was one figure I kept seeing in the kitchen, but I never saw their face. They only stood with their back to me. So, you know, I think our timelines were just crossing or something, but no one else in the house that lived there ever had any encounters that I know of. And yeah, so that's how I was terrorized by a little child, ghost, spirit, for having to get rid of a cat, for being poor, essentially.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
Okay, so this situation happened within a 3-day time span. So I used to do home health care, and I had this one lady, and she was the sweetest can be. Like, she was one of my favorites, but she was 103. You couldn't tell she was 103 because she looked really good and she was still independent, but she really just needed someone to like be there with her and watch her to make sure nothing happened. So I was third shift. I did 7:30 to 7:30. I had about 3 to 4 days on, and then I had the rest of the days off. So like I said, this happened in a 3-day time span because by the 4th day she was unfortunately gone. So first night comes, and every time when I would get there, she would always have like a pillow and a blanket and the remote waiting for me, because she's like, you're going to be here all night. You might as well get comfortable, watch some TV, do what you got to do, which I did get comfortable, watch some TV. I did. So I'm in the living room watching TV. Now, mind you, off to the side, there were a set of stairs that led to the upstairs. But she had not been upstairs in the last, I think, like 10 years because she just could not do stairs anymore. So the upstairs was just really not used. And her family didn't really come see her either, so no one had been in the upstairs in about 10 years. So as I'm sitting there watching TV, all of a sudden I literally hear footsteps, light footsteps, come down the stairs. And it happened real quick, but I heard the footsteps come down the stairs. So I quick look over, and I'm sitting there like, nah, I'm tripping. I'm tripping. It's like 2 o'clock in the morning. I ain't got no sleep. I really didn't get no sleep the night before, so I was like, I'm tripping. I'm just tripping. So about a good maybe 2 minutes later, I hear the footsteps going back up the stairs. Like, you know when you can hear from going up from going down. I heard the footsteps going back up the stairs. So at this point, I know I'm not tripping. I know for a fact I heard something. It's not because I'm late, because I'm tired. I really heard something. So I go and I check on, we'll call her Miss Mabel. So I go and I check on Miss Mabel, and she's sitting straight up in her bed, right? Staring at a corner in her room. And I'm like, Miss Mabel. And she did not snap out of it until I went over and I touched her shoulder. And she said, oh, what are you doing up? Or is everything okay? And I'm like, girl, are you okay? So I put her back to bed, and then the night passes. I leave. I come back the next night. So the next night comes, and this night I am exhausted. Like, I had just worked my second job earlier in the day. I didn't get a chance to take a nap, so I am exhausted because I had been up almost 24 freaking hours, right? So I'm sitting there, I'm dozing off on the couch, and all of a sudden I hear her talking. But not like as in like just saying, oh, just having a little conversation with herself. No, she's literally, everything she's saying is a response to something. Like, she's having a conversation with somebody. So after a little while, I go in the room and I ask, I'm like, hey, Miss Mabel, like, what's going on? You okay? Like, who are you talking to? This lady looks at me with the biggest smile on her face. And she said, oh, I'm just talking to the lovely lady that's been coming to see me for the past couple nights. So you know what immediately popped in my head? What fucking lady? Ain't no lady in here. So I'm like, oh, okay, girl, okay, you know. I'm like, maybe we should get you back to bed. So I put her back to bed. And that night passes, and I go home. Third night comes. So the third night comes, and this is where shit, like, just really starts to just amp up. So I'm sitting on the couch in the living room, minding my business, right? And all of a sudden, I hear footsteps come back down those stairs, okay? And this time, I hear them go into the kitchen. Mind you, the kitchen is right behind me. So I'm frozen in fear. I'm not looking behind me at all. I'm sitting there acting like I didn't hear it. I don't know what the fuck is going on. So after about 5 minutes of me sitting there frozen in fear and in sweat, Miss Mabel comes around the corner. Now, mind you, in the living room, she had this special chair that she loved to take naps in, or she loved to just come and sleep in the middle of the night when she couldn't, just sleep in her bed. So she comes in and she's like, you know what? I think I'm going to just spend the rest of the night in here with you. And I said, why, Miss Mabel? Is everything okay? That's fine, but are you okay? This woman looks at me. And she goes, the people in my room won't stop talking to me. Hello? So at this point, I'm terrified, but I don't want her to know that I'm terrified and that I'm shitting my pants right now, because I'm supposed to be there to protect you, right? Right. So I finally get her to go back to sleep so I can be in fear by myself. So I jet out the door the next day. I was so glad to see the day nurse come, because I was like, girl, I gotta fucking go. And literally, probably around like 5 or 6 o'clock that night, I got a call saying I don't have to come in because she passed away. And I feel like whatever was going on in that house, or whoever the fuck was going through the house or running through the house or messing with her in the middle of the night, I really feel like they were preparing her to go. Looking back on it, I really feel like they was. But I don't know. I have never experienced anything else like that ever again. I hope that I never do, because that was some freaky shit. But yeah.
I don't know if y'all have been seeing this creator's video on your For You page, but she's all over mine. She made a video saying, tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. If you know me, you know I have a lot of those, and I come with receipts. So my mom, my dad, my sister, and her newborn baby had just moved to this small town in the Midwest called Liberty, Missouri. Now this town is very old. It has a lot of history. The house that we bought and we moved into, I don't think was haunted, but I think it was more so the land itself that was haunted. To kind of give y'all an idea of just how old this town was and how much history it has, this building that's behind me is called the Oddfellows Home. This building was built, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think in 1893. So very, very old. It's been a hospital for the mentally ill, the physically ill. I think at one point it was an orphanage. So this town has been around for a while. For the entirety of my mom's life, she's always had a lot of supernatural experiences. She's been very intuitive. So right when we moved in, she kind of sensed that there was some sort of entity or spirit, and we always thought it was kind of a childlike spirit just because it was more so playful, and it just played a lot of pranks. It never really threatened us or our safety or anything. Now, as mentioned before, it was my dad, my mom, my sister, and her newborn baby living in this house, and the most activity happened in this room, which was the baby's nursery room. The doors in this room would always open and close by themselves. My niece would wake up in the middle of the night or really early in the morning, around 3 or 4. She would stand up in her crib looking out over the room, yelling into space, yelling no, yelling stay back. I'll show those videos in a second. I would say the creepiest part about this room was that in this closet, which the door never stayed shut in this room, in this closet there's a little crawl space that was kind of locked in. Here's a better picture of the door. You can actually see in this photo that this door is cracked open, and that's how it always stayed. No matter how many times you shut it, that door would always, always, always open back up. Now, this bedroom was actually a Jack and Jill bedroom, so there was a bathroom connecting these 2 bedrooms that were right next to each other, and this bathroom is probably where the most creepy thing ever happened. My sister got out of the shower and saw this on the mirror. Now, mind you, she was the only person in the house. My dad was visiting family in Iowa. My mom was on a work trip. I was down here in Texas with my husband. And at this point, she had been alone in the house, just her and her newborn, for a week. This was the last day of the week that she was alone. And she takes a shower, and she gets out of the shower, and she sees this on the mirror. Mind you, we have lived in the house for a year at this point. We've taken so many showers. That mirror has fogged up so many times. Never ever has a message been written on this mirror. Now, this is kind of where we were validated in the fact that we thought this was a childlike spirit. Not only did it play pranks and kind of mess with us like that, but we think that this spells out Anna Boanna, and then there's 3 little stars. You can't really see that one, but there's 3 little stars underneath it, and this just really confirms that we were right in assuming that this might be a kid. As mentioned previously, my niece would, in the middle of the night, stand up in her crib and look out over the room and yell things like no and stay back, and I will show you guys that right now. Another thing that would happen a lot in that nursery was we would see a lot of orbs, and I know orbs are controversial, okay? A lot of people are like, oh, they're bugs, or oh, it's dust, or oh, it's just light from the camera and reflections and refractions or whatever, but just the way that these were moving, they had to be orbs. They had to be orbs, and I'll show you that now. The last video that I'll show you is me walking in the bedroom. As I mentioned previously, doors would open and shut by themselves all the time. Now, I understand when you walk through a doorway, sometimes the door will close behind you because of the wind, but usually it needs momentum for the door to completely latch. The video I'm about to show you, I walked through the doorway at a normal speed, I'm not running through the doorway, and you can see it slowly shut, and the door completely latches. Completely latches. No way that door completely latches with as slow as it was going. Watch.
completely latched.
So to wrap up the video, I'll tell 2 more stories. I don't have any videos or pictures from these, but I'm pretty sure y'all can take my word for it. I'm obviously not lying here. My first ever encounter with this spirit entity, whatever it was when we had just moved in. It was late 2019. I was just diagnosed with ovarian cancer, so I actually just had a pretty big surgery, and I was on some pretty hefty pain pills. I was on hydrocodone, so initially I thought I was just seeing things, but I'm upstairs, I'm in the Jack and Jill bedrooms. The bedroom that I'm in, the light is off. The bathroom that is connected to the bedroom, that light is on. So I wake up and I look in the doorframe of the bathroom and I see a figure. And it's nobody in my family. It doesn't look like anybody in my family. I see the figure, I get up and leave the room. I don't stare at it, I don't interact with it, I just get up and I leave. I go downstairs. All my family is downstairs. Nobody was up there. And then lastly, probably the craziest thing. So it was just my mom, my sister, and the newborn. It was around the winter time and it was about to be a big snowstorm. So my mom and my sister left the house to go run a bunch of errands before all the roads closed. They get back home with all the groceries and they take out the groceries in the car and they take all the bags and place them on the counter. Now, mind you, no food is put away, no groceries are put away. They just simply put the bags full of food on the counters and they quickly realize that they forgot something. So they leave, they come back with the thing they forgot. When they walk in the front door, they see all of the food, all of the groceries that they brought in and kept in the bags are out of the bags, just haphazardly placed around the kitchen in the most random spots. And probably the weirdest, tiniest creepy detail of the whole story is the twist ties on loaves of bread that was taken off of the bread and it was placed on the edge of the counter, sitting up just like a little person with its little legs crossed. So those are probably the craziest stories that I have from that house. Like I said before, if you know me, if I know you, you've probably heard these stories because I literally tell them every chance I get.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
My brother once had a girlfriend who got drunk one night and admitted to me that she'd been having an ongoing sexual relationship with the ghost that lived in the attic of my mom's house. So...
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Me, I have one. So growing up, I lived in North Carolina and our house was 1000% haunted. My sister follows me on here. If she sees this video, she'll corroborate my story because Jesus fucking Christ. So when I was little, my dad was overseas. He was in the military. And so then when he came home, I think I was probably 8, maybe 9. No, I was 8. And when he came home, I was like, oh, I want to sleep in the bed with daddy. I want to sleep with dad. And he's like, yeah, of course. So I slept in his bed and his door was open. And I was up that night late reading with a flashlight because I was like, oh, I'm going to blow his socks off reading this book to him. And that night I heard footsteps coming up the stairs and it was keys jangling. And so I go under the covers, have the covers up to here. And in the doorway, I see an apparition of my father. My dad is laying next to me, but I see my dad as plain as day. Oh, it makes me sick just thinking about it. He is a little bit transparent, I can kind of see through him, but it's my father. It's 2000s glasses on the back of the head, spiked cargo shorts with the keys on the carabiner. It was exactly my dad. Then he starts going, come here, Vivian. It's my name. Come here, Vivian. And I was like, no way. And I put my covers over my head. And when I looked back out, he was gone. I have so many other stories about that house, but that's the one that sticks with me the most because it scared me so bad. I'll tell you one. I don't remember this. This was told to me by my dad because I was a baby when it happened. But so there is basically 3 stories for our house. There's the downstairs level that has a pool table, billiards. And we are on the top floor. So 3 floors above that. And I'm a baby, baby, sleeping in my crib, can't get out. And then one night, my dad hears me crying. And he goes to my room, crib empty. No, baby. He starts freaking out, obviously. And he's searching around the house, following my cry. I'm downstairs, 3 stories down, on top of the pool table. I'm sat on the pool table, like holding a pool ball, crying. I'm telling you, I was probably like 14 months, 15 months. You cannot get out of your crib. Nor could I walk down all those stairs and then get on top of a pool table. Then what? And in that house, me and my sisters, we were on top of the stairs. They're a lot older than me, and they know this story. We were on top of the stairs, and we were looking down into the darkness. Nobody else was home, and we were just like playing with a bouncy ball, like throwing shit down there. You know how kids are stupid. And we threw a bottle cap down there, and it threw back at us, like.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, so the story I'm about to tell is why I will never touch a Ouija board. When I was in elementary school, I went to a friend's sleepover party for her birthday. It was me, her, a few of our mutual friends, and a few of her friends who I didn't know personally. The house that my friend lived in was kind of old, dark, a little bit far out from the city, but not completely isolated, but still kind of creepy. So this was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So while we're having this sleepover, we're playing all of those games that we used to play back then. So we played Light as a Feather, we played Bloody Mary, and we just sat around telling ghost stories in the dark. All of that was fine. Nothing out of the ordinary happened while we were doing that. So after we get done with those games, I hear one of her friends talking to some of the other girls, and she's asking them like, oh, should I do it? Do you want to see it? Should we try it? And it turns out that she brought a Ouija board, and she was trying to see if anybody else wanted to try it out with her. So for context, while I was growing up, had some paranormal experiences, or at the very least experiences that I can't explain. And so for me, I prefer to just stay away from anything like that. I didn't like to engage. So the fact that all of my friends were trying to, mess around with the Ouija board was making me really uncomfortable. So they placed the Ouija board on the floor, and then everyone who was going to play sat down in a circle around the Ouija board. Everyone participated except for myself and one other girl. So since I wasn't participating, I sat down on an armchair that was right in front of where they were sitting on the floor. And then the other girl, who was also not participating, she sat on an armchair off to my left. And her armchair had its back to my friend's sliding glass door that led out to her deck. All of the lights were off in the room that we were playing in. Pretty much all the lights, in that entire floor were off. The only thing that was on was the TV, and the TV was on just in the background on mute, and everything else, again, was just pitch black dark. So the girls who were playing start asking it questions, like silly stuff, like, oh, who am I gonna marry? Am I gonna be rich? Stuff like that. So everything was going fine. And then all of a sudden, one of the girls slams her hand down on the board and says in this kind of, strange voice. It was still her voice, but the tone was a little off. She slams her hand down and she says, you guys are doing it wrong. You're supposed to say hello first. Don't be rude. And so everyone looks at her like, wow, what a weirdo. But they went ahead and listened to her anyway. So they started over, they said hello, and then they started asking new questions. At this point, they're asking these questions. The planchette is moving. They start arguing over who's actually moving it and, whatever. While this is happening, all of a sudden, the hairs on my arms and the back of my neck start pricking. And I look up at where the TV is. Next to the TV, off to the right, was a hallway. The hallway was dark because, again, all the lights are off. The hallway is dark, but the entrance to the hallway is right next to the TV. And so what I see there is a silhouette, a pitch black, dark silhouette of what appears to be a person. And I was so freaked out, but I couldn't look away. I was staring at it, and I thought maybe that's just her dad. And so I'm looking for any sign that this figure that I'm looking at is her dad. But the problem is that her dad had kind of long, scraggly hair that was like, it would show off over here. So he also had a fairly thick beard. So if that was her dad, I still would have been able to see from the shadow silhouette his hair and his beard. This figure had nothing. It was an outline and nothing else. I also couldn't feel, I don't know if any of you have experienced this. If you have, please let me know, because this is the strangest thing I've ever seen. I didn't get that feeling of recognition that you get when you're looking at another human. Even if you don't know the person, you at least intuitively know that you're looking at a human being. I did not get that from this figure that I was looking at. So while I'm staring at this thing, and I don't even know how long I was staring at it, the same girl who slammed her hand down, all of a sudden, projectile vomits all over the board. And obviously, as soon as she does it, everyone who is sitting around the board screams and scatters away from the board. Everyone's staring at her, including me. That broke my concentration. So I'm staring at her, and she kept her head down, looking at the board after she vomited. And she says in this like almost whisper tone, oh, it freaks me out. I said, "Don't be rude." So at that point, I hear the bedroom door to where my friend's dad was sleeping open. I hear him walking down the hall, and I see him coming from where the figure was standing. And when I watched him do that, I knew for a fact that was not her dad that I saw standing there. And I know that because, again, like I said earlier, you would be able to see his hair, you'd be able to see his beard as part of his shadow. So needless to say, I did not sleep a wink that night. I don't think anyone else did either. I never went back to her house, and I 100% will never touch a Ouija board.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely...
Okay, so I have a couple stories, but there's one main one that I will never forget. It will always freak me out. And it happened in my house when I was in high school. So I'll share the first story that like led up to this main event, and then I'll talk about what really happened. So basically, I was in the 6th grade, and I was having a sleepover with my friend, and I had no idea what a Ouija board was. No one's ever told me. You know, this was like, you know, early 2000s at this point. And, you know, I just wasn't educated on it. And so, of course, me being a 6th grader, thinking it was a board game, I'm like, yay, board game. Like, let's try something new, you know? And so we were playing it. You know, nothing was really going on. Like, we were asking some silly questions like, oh, who am I going to marry when I'm older, you know? And it wasn't really saying a whole lot. But looking back on it, something that kind of freaks me out is when we asked who we were talking to, it went to a Z. And I'm not going to talk any further on that. If you know, you know. And so we went upstairs to go get some, you know, water, some snacks, stuff like that. My parents asked me, you know, what are you guys doing downstairs? And we say, we're playing the Ouija board. And my parents are like, nope, absolutely not. You are not playing that. Please stop doing that. And so we went downstairs, we closed it up, and what followed after that freaked me out. So we heard some voices that night, nothing crazy, honestly. It wasn't like the super dramatic thing. But for years, I started hearing voices. I started seeing some things like people calling out my name in the middle of the night. I saw something in my closet, you know, just like random things here and there. I vividly remember when I was younger, this was middle school now. I don't remember the exact time, but my siblings were, you know, young. And we were home alone. My parents were traveling that day. And so they were coming back home. We were alone. Our babysitter had left. And we all, for some reason, looked down to the right. And so that's where our hallway was. And we had a really long extended hallway. And then our parents' doorway was facing where that hallway was. And so we all look over at the same time. It was the weirdest thing. And we see this man, like this really, really tall man standing there. And all of us say nothing. And we see this man turn and walk down the hallway. And so I look at them and I'm like, did you see that? And they're like, yeah. And I don't know what made us do this, but we went throughout the house and started trying to find if there was a man in the house. And if you've seen any horror movies, it's definitely not what you're supposed to do. Like, don't do that. But for some reason that was, the mindset at the time, and we searched everywhere, nothing was there, so there was no man. And we start moving on knowing that, we had just seen some random dude in our house and he disappeared. And so for years after that, nothing crazy really happened. Again, sometimes I'd hear somebody walking in the house when I was home alone or like in the middle of the night, but I just ignored it, tried not to give it any mind. But this is where the main event happens. So my brother passed away when I was in high school, and he lived in Tennessee with, my other family. My parents are, not together. So that side of the family, told me the news, and I went out and, flew out for the funeral. And so the day after the funeral, when I was flying home, my stepmom had lost her keys. And I went into her bathroom. She sets things in weird places. So she told me to look in her bathroom, look in her closet just to see if she dropped it, try to find, where the keys are so we can leave and go to breakfast together before I have to get on the plane. And I don't know what it was, but I felt such a difference in the air. Like the atmosphere went cold. I can't describe it. But if you've experienced something like this, it's a very eerie feeling. I felt like I was isolated, even though there were 3 other people in the house, but I was alone in that room. And all of a sudden I felt like metaphorically cornered in the closet, and I heard my name being called with my brother's voice. And it's like time stopped. I knew it wasn't him, because I thought that if it really was him, I wouldn't be freaked out. I wouldn't be feeling such a dark, gross feeling. Mind you, I'm already emotional because, I loved my brother and he had just passed away. And so hearing his voice was like weird, and it was emotional for me. And I ran out of that room because I felt like whatever was talking to me was not him and it wasn't safe. So I ran out, and my stepmom had been calling for me for 10 minutes and I didn't hear her. So literally, it's like time had stopped. So I told them about this at breakfast, and they're like, oh, I wish he would talk to me. And I'm like, but it wasn't him. Like, this is the weird thing. It wasn't him, right? And so I go home, months go by, nothing happens. I'm grieving my brother, I'm sad. And I talk to him sometimes, at that point. I still do, but, at this, during this story, I was talking to him sometimes, and whatever it was that talked to me at my stepmom's house followed me to my house in Minnesota. So I was in Tennessee. That's where the first event happened. I'm back in Minnesota at my mom's house where, the Ouija board thing had happened. We're keeping that in mind. So I go to bed one night. I'm the only one that lives upstairs, right? And so that's where the front door is. My bedroom at the time was right next to the front door. And so we had a staircase going downstairs, and that's where my parents and my siblings were. My mom would stay upstairs in the kitchen, dining room area until, sometimes later in the night, just getting projects done. She's a very crafty person. So I went to bed knowing that she was, kind of within the vicinity. I felt safe. And what I did was I always closed the doors and closed the blinds before I went to bed because, I'd experienced some things. I was a little freaked out. And I had already some nights experienced sleep paralysis. And, I was already kind of on edge about that. So close all the blinds, close the doors. and I had my radio on, and I start, you know, kind of dozing off, and my radio sounds slower and like distorted all of a sudden. And I'm like, something's about to happen. And it did. So I felt like I heard the doors opening, but I was like, no, I'm going crazy. Like there's nobody else that would be, but it was both doors, like my closet door and my door to my bathroom that I heard opening. And I'm like, there's not two people in my room. Like there's no way. And I didn't even hear my room door open, the main door. And so I can't get up. It's like I am, you know, I'm in sleep paralysis. I can't do anything. I can't talk. I can't open my eyes. I can't move. And all of a sudden I feel myself getting up, and I'm like, this isn't me. This isn't me. And so I feel myself get out of bed, like, but I don't feel like I'm in control of my own body. And I feel myself like, you know, reach my hand out for my door. And I feel the doorknob. I start, you know, opening my door. And all of a sudden I hear my brother's voice come from my bathroom, and him saying, Maddie, I need to talk to you. And I don't know how, but somehow, some way I was able to talk in that moment. And I'm like, no, get out. Like, I know this isn't you. I don't want to hear it. And I don't know what it was, but it was like, okay, I'll leave. Like, okay, you'll leave. Okay. But here I am, like kind of traumatized because, you know, it's my brother's voice again. And I'm still grieving. Like, this is only a couple months after he passed. And so I'm like, well, what if it was my brother? And I carried on that guilt for so long, thinking like, well, what if it was him? Like, but it was that creepy feeling again. And I'm like, you know what? If this is really my brother, there is no way that he would do this to me, that he would like freak me out, that he would like try to do all this stuff. Like, there's just no way. I feel like he would come and try to peacefully talk to me and have a conversation. But, you know, that's a whole other conversation. And so I opened my eyes, like after I muster enough courage, you know, I open my eyes and all my doors are open, all of them. And nobody was upstairs. My mom is already fast asleep at this point. It was like midnight. And I know this story sounds crazy, but this really happened, and it still freaks me out to this day. And I don't know.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first. When I was 8.
Okay, so when I was about 14, we relocated to the suburbs of Chicago. We're originally from LA, but before that we lived in Texas, and from Texas we relocated to Naperville, Illinois, specifically like the west suburbs of Chicago. And I remember living in that home that my parents had bought that was beautiful home. It's probably one of the prettiest houses we've ever lived in. With that being said, it was the most fucking creepiest houses we've ever lived in. I remember, you know, as a teenager, you're a fucking shithead. And I just remember like not believing in really anything. I didn't really believe in ghosts growing up, and, you know, before these encounters. And I just remember like one night I was in my parents' room, and my parents have these two giant French doors that open up into the hallway. All the bedrooms are on the second floor. So it was like at night, I was talking to my mom, and she was standing like away from the entrance of her room, like closer to her bathroom, and we were talking, and I was facing the hallway. And I remember I turned to look at the hallway, and I saw a fucking man. He had to be like over 6 foot easy, tall, skinny, white, with sunken cheekbones, big blue eyes, and he had a bowler hat on, and he was wearing a black suit. If we were to pick him out from a time period, it would probably be like 1920s attire, but he had like a bowler hat on, okay? And he had clean shaven, white, with sunken cheekbones, and these like crazy blue eyes, big, just staring at me. And it wasn't like an evil stare, it wasn't like a malicious grin, it was just like him staring at me, like stone face, just staring in my soul. And I remember I freaked out. I like jumped, and I was like, oh my god, who the fuck is that? And my mom saw my reaction, and she's like, what happened? And I looked at her, and I was like all shocked, like, and I looked back, and he was gone, fucking gone. And I stood there like, oh my god, did I just see a ghost? I have to have seen a ghost. Like, that was the craziest thing I've ever experienced in my fucking life. To this day, I'm an adult now, and I have never experienced something like that. And I just remember standing there in shock, because I was like, did I just see a ghost? Like, it was so real. He looked so real. And then he was gone. And then that's not the craziest thing. I remember living in the house was always unsettling. I remember going to bed at night and feeling like someone was always staring at me. Like walking in the dark through the house, I would always feel like a presence. Like I felt like someone was like right there, like watching me. And I always felt so like uncomfortable ever living in that house. The entire time. I have lived in that house for almost 5 years and I always felt uncomfortable living there. And the craziest thing is, not only did that happen to me, my mom one day, it was like a school day, we were all at school, my dad was at work, and she was like washing the dishes, and she looked out from the window, and from the window in our kitchen, we could see the backyard, and we had a pool. They had a pool in the house, and it was like right before it started snowing, so it was already cold. They had the pool was already covered up, and my mom said she looked up and she saw a toddler. She said she like a kid. She said probably like not even 2 years old, running towards the pool, and she freaked out. She's like, oh my god, there's a baby running towards the pool. And she said the baby was only in diapers, and I was like, huh? So she told me this baby was in diapers and running towards the pool, and she freaked out. So she said that she like stopped, she like ran out, you know, to go stop this kid from getting hurt, and the kid was gone. She didn't see the kid anymore. She said she stood there like trying to look for this kid. She said she looked around and nothing of the sort. And she said she stood there for like at least 5 minutes, like, I swear to god, I just saw a kid run towards the fucking pool. And to this day, we don't know. And you know, our neighbors too didn't have kids. Like, our neighbors on each side, they had like grown-ass teenagers. You know, it was like a retired couple, and then like the other one was like teenagers, so like no babies in sight. And she said it was like this little tiny white baby that ran towards the pool, and she freaked out, and she was so convinced that that house was haunted, because every time even she would like feel uncomfortable being by herself all day in the house. Just like, you know, she'd find excuses to like leave and go out because she didn't want to be there by herself. Like, to this day I remember living there feeling so uncomfortable. But when I was 18, I moved out to go to college. And we're from LA, so I moved back to LA to live with my grandparents. And I just remember feeling so much more comfortable like living with them, because like their home, I've never felt that presence. And the craziest thing is, the home they live in is old. They've been living there, like that house was built in the 1920s. And they have been living in this house since the late 80s, early 90s. So they've been here for a minute, and I've never felt uncomfortable. I've always felt like totally fine. I've never felt weird presences. I've never felt anyone watching me. It's always been like super, super chill living in this house. But that house in fucking Chicago, in Naperville, Illinois, was so unsettling. And like, my parents don't live there anymore. Like, they moved out. My mom, when my sister moved out for college, she was like, we're moving out, and they moved out ASAP. Never have I lived in a house so unsettling and uncomfortable. And I don't know if it's like the area, I don't know if like you grew up in Chicago, but like, is that a thing? Is like there a man, like a ghost, like a bowler man, or what is it called? A man in a bowler hat, a white man in a bowler hat. Is that like a thing in Chicago? Like, do people see him? Because I saw him, and to this day, I can't explain it. Like, I'm really like, I don't really believe in a lot, but that shit, I believe in ghosts now. I do. And I saw that man as clear as day, and I don't know who the fuck he was. And if anyone knows, I would love to get insight on that, because that was the creepiest experience of my life. And I know it sounds crazy. I know it sounds like unbelievable, but I saw that man. My mother saw that baby. I don't know what the fuck. That house is fucking haunted. I hope the people that live there now are not experiencing what we experienced. But I don't know, guys. I don't know. I want to know more about that man.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
So before I tell the story, just know I was young. I was young and I was dumb, and I also was trying to fit in, okay? So, freshman year of college, just moved first week first like 2 weeks in the dorm, just moved in. I met this guy I really liked, and he had already had like a really large group of friends at the college. So one night he texts me, he's like, hey, me and a bunch of like people, we're gonna go hang out and, you know, smoke and drink and stuff. Do you want to come? And you know, I really liked him, so I was like, oh my gosh, yes, of course I'm gonna come. So we roll out. It's like 3 or 4 cars. There's like 12 of us. We're rolling in deep, right? And I'm like, okay, where are we going? He's like, oh, I'm gonna take you to this spot. You know, we've been coming here the last couple of days and everything. It's a really cool spot to hang out because, of course, you can't do that stuff in the dorm room. So me, I'm just like happy to ride. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I've made friends already. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy. And context, it's like 11 o'clock at night. It's super, super dark and it's cloudy. So we're riding out. We leave the college. We're riding out for a while. Like, we're going way out there. And I'm like, where are we going? So finally we come to like this really long road, and there's nothing but like woods surrounding us. It's just one singular road in woods. It's like pitch black. We're riding down this road and we come to this like clearing, and there's one street light. And I'm like, where are we? And so I'm like pulling into the spot, following other cars. And as our headlight like shines on this clearing, I see that it's a graveyard. And I'm trying to be cool about it. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm being too superstitious. Like, I'm not trying to, you know, seem stuck up to these new friends I'm trying to make, you know, first year college, trying to like get in where I fit in. So by the time we get there, there's already a couple of cars there. There's already people hanging out. And the people who rode with us, like in the back seat, they get out. And then the guy that I liked, he's riding up front with me. He gets out. And then I open my door. The moment I open my door, there is this huge gust of cold wind. Mind you, it's August in South Alabama. It's hot. There's this huge gust of cold wind. And then the whole forest surrounding us, the woods, gets completely silent. We're in the South, okay? There are so many bugs and animals and critters that like are chittering and making noises at night. They just stop. It gets like eerily quiet. And the people who are already there, they like stop for a second and they're just like looking around. Everyone like just like pauses, because when you're used to hearing like all that ambient noise and then it just completely goes away, it's startling. So I got the door open. I got one foot in the car still, one foot out of the car. And the guy like, it's like, come on, let's go. I'm just like, okay. So I get out of the car and I'm out there for like 5 minutes and I'm feeling uneasy, but I'm trying to like push it down. But because I'm feeling uneasy, I'm not participating in like the drinking and smoking. So everything's good. Everyone's like laughing and dancing, and they're playing like music from a speaker, and they're all drinking and smoking and stuff. And I'm getting to know like new people. So the speaker that they're playing music on, it just dies. And then we hear like a really weird, like loud noise coming from the woods. We hear a really weird noise. I don't exactly know how to describe it, but right after that noise, we hear what sounds like chains. It sounds like someone's like jangling chains, and it's echoing through the whole woods. We're surrounded by the woods. Like, there's woods all around us, and then there's just the street that we came on. So you can hear it echoing around us, like the chains are like surrounding us. I'm like, nope. I get in my car and I sit in my car. I stay in my car while they're out there doing stuff. They stay out there for like an hour. I'm in my car strolling on my phone. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Snapchat, and suddenly I just hear screaming, and everybody runs to their cars. Everybody runs to their car. They get in my car, like, go. I'm like trying to get my keys. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's going on? I'm like, what's happening? They're like, just drive. So we're driving, and as we're driving, I'm like, what's going on? What happened? And they were like, we heard people. And I'm like, what? And they're like, yes, we heard people. And then it sounded like people just running towards us, like just people running to us. We could hear them. So that happens, right? A couple weeks pass. Everything's fine. And then things weren't fine. Things started going like weird in my dorm room. And at the time, I didn't know this, but weird stuff wasn't just happening to me. It was happening to all my roommates. So in my dorm room, it was 4 of us. Okay, me and my best friend, we shared a dorm room. And then there were 2 other girls. One girl, it was a black girl. She was super spiritual. And the other girl, she was white. And she was like very hardcore Christian. So weird stuff was happening to all of us, but we weren't communicating it with each other. One of the weird things that happened to me and my boyfriend, we were sleeping in the living room because whenever he was my boyfriend at this time now. So we're in the living room sleeping, and I have a really bad dream. I like sit up because I'm about to get a sip of water, and I look over to the corner and I see like this shadow, like this dark shadow just like glooming towards us. Like, I don't know how to describe where a head would be. It was like turned like that to us, and we're sleeping like on the floor on like sleeping bags. So I scream, and my boyfriend wakes up, and he's like, what's going on? And I was like, I saw something. And he looks at me, and he was just like, what did you see? And I tell him. And so we stay up, and we like watch like funny movies to try to lift the mood. And then, you know, the next day he tells me, I didn't want to freak you out even more, but like I had a nightmare. Like right when you screamed, I was having like a terrible nightmare. And he was like, I actually been having like nightmares every night I stay in your dorm room. And then he was like, I think I'm gonna sleep in my own dorm room for a while. So like he didn't sleep in my dorm room for like a couple of weeks after that happened. So things were happening. My best friend, she would be in the dorm room when I went to class, and she'd be the only one in there because she had a different schedule than the rest of us. And she said that the door, and our doors were heavy. These are really heavy doors. She said she would have the door close and it would just swing open and then close again. Swing open, close again randomly. She got so scared that she ended up going to like she would go to the cafe when no one else was in the dorm room because she was so scared to be by herself in the dorm room. We had stuff on our walls. It wouldn't fall. It would be like thrown across the room. How does something hanging up on a wall, like our lights, like our little Christmas lights, it wouldn't just fall, thrown across the room. Lights would flicker, cabinets would open. And one day, me and my best friend, we were like sitting there eating, and we were talking about it, and the spiritual girl and her boyfriend, they walk in, they hear us talking about it, and they're like, you guys weird stuff has been happening to you guys too? We're like, yeah. And they tell us the stuff that's been happening. And then her boyfriend was like, yeah, one night we were out in the living room and she was asleep, and I look over and I see like this dark shadow, and I'm just like, I saw the exact same thing. So he gets oil, he starts anointing and praying over it. He's like, yeah, we got to get whatever's in here out of here. So he's praying, he's pulling out the works, okay? He's blessing every room, he's putting crosses over every door. And while he's doing this, our other roommate walks in and she freaks out. She completely freaks out. She packs up all her stuff. I don't know why. I still don't know why to this day she went crazy. She packs up her stuff, she leaves, she never comes back. Never comes back. So it was good for a while. But then the spiritual girl, like her boyfriend, stopped coming to the dorm room because he got a job. So he wasn't sleeping there. When he stopped coming, things started getting bad again. So fast forward, things are getting weird again. Stuff is starting to happen. Me and my friend, we put a Bible on the desk and we leave it open because we're like, that's how scared we are. We're sleeping and we just hear the Bible, boom, close. And we're like, oh, hell no. No. So we're in theater class and we're talking about this, and this girl hears us. She hears us from across the room. She walks over to us and she says, I did not want to scare you guys, but for the last like month and a half, I have felt like this dark presence around you guys. And she was like, I can feel like this dark presence like around y'all. And we were like, what? And she was like, I don't want to freak you guys out, but like I can, like I'm really like spiritually tapped in. And she was like, can I come to your dorm room and see what's going on? And we're like, sure. So we tell our friends what's going on. So our friends that were at the graveyard, they come too because they want to see what's going on, because when they would come over and we would have like game nights and stuff, weird stuff would happen as well. So we walk into the dorm room. She comes in last. As soon as she comes in the room, like she steps over the threshold into the room, the lights flicker. Like, and I'm not talking about like, no, I'm like the lights are flickering, going crazy. And she's a white girl. She has really like dark red hair. We can see the hair on her arms just like stand up. Like we could see it. We could see the hair on the backs of her neck. She just got like chills all over her entire body. And she was like, there's a spirit here. And she was like, this spirit is not happy that I'm in this room. So she's like going through the entire dorm room, right? And she gets to my bed, my side of the dorm room, and the doors, both doors, our room door and our other roommate's room doors, open and close, open and close, open and close. At this point, everyone's like screaming, freaking out. And she starts talking to the spirit and she's like, I know you're scared, but you need to calm down. Like, you're okay, calm down. And then everything just stops and it just feels so calm. And she's like talking to the spirit and we're just like we're looking. And she's like, okay, we need to get her back. And we're like, what? Get who back? And she was like, you need to take her back to her gravesite. And we were like, what? So we all get in the car, we take it back to the gravesite, and she finds this unmarked grave and she puts her spirit.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true. I'll go first.
Okay, I'm gonna try really hard to summarize this because I could literally talk about this forever. I'm gonna tell you guys my dad's story because I have my own that I think is really, really freaky, but his is like another level. When my dad was a teenager, he was a little more on the rebellious side, and my grandma was very, very religious. She always has been. And so when his friend came over with Ouija board and said, "Do you want to do this?" He was like, "Okay, sure." I think also at the time people were more acute to believe that Ouija boards weren't real because we didn't have the internet and we weren't able to hear people's stories about this. So it's my dad, my dad's friend, and my dad's brother, so my uncle. They all decide to do it together because they're all friends. They sit down, they open the board, and they have the spirit come through. It's a girl, she says she's a pilgrim, I don't remember the name, and they talk to her, and it's fine, they have a good experience. So because they had a good experience and it was fun, they did it again and again. They did it about 2 or 3 times. Everything was fine every single time until the last time they ever used it. The last time they ever used a Ouija board, they sat down and they were talking to this one specific spirit. Again, she's the only one that they ever talked to. While they're talking to her, she's in the middle of spelling something out, the board stops, and the pattern, the way it starts to move starts to change. So pretty immediately they could tell that it's not her anymore, there's something else there, and they're kind of confused, so they ask, "Is someone else here?" The board moves to yes, and they're like, "Okay, who are you?" And it starts to spell out a name. I'm not going to say the name because I believe names have power and it genuinely scares me, but I will finger spell it. Okay, it's pretty easy to figure out who this is, you'll see. And the way that the board is moving now is different. It's ominous. It like has a negative energy to it. So they ask the person or whoever, they ask the spirit, "What do you want? Like, why are you here? Why did you get rid of the other spirit?" The board starts to spell out over and over again, "I want to kill you. I want to kill you." Over and over. So this is enough for them. They close out the board, they don't talk about it, they never use it again, they don't touch it. But obviously this experience stuck with my dad. It's scary. So when he became an adult and Google had just kind of become a thing, he decides to Google it and see if there's any information about this spirit. Nothing comes up. There's not much on Google at this point, so he's like, "Oh, okay, whatever." A couple years later, once it's a little bit more established, he Googles again, and there's a little bit more information. Other people are talking about this and the experiences that they've had, and he's like, "Oh, that's really weird." And then when the internet becomes fully established, YouTube's a thing, Reddit's a thing, it's there. He Googles it a 3rd time. And at this point, there's a full-length feature film about it, YouTube videos, Reddit threads, like thousands of people talking about how they've had an experience with this one specific spirit. That's why I said it's really easy to figure out who this is if you actually want to. I wouldn't really recommend, I don't. So of course this terrifies him. He's like, "Oh my god, like that's crazy." And I 100% believe my dad because I grew up hearing the story before the internet was a really established thing, so I know he's not making it up. So yeah, I definitely have a handful of my own to tell, but that is my dad's.
Tell me a ghost story that sounds completely unbelievable but is entirely true.
Okay, I got one because me and my dad literally just talked about this story like recently, and it still creeps me out to this day. So my dad's best friend, my Uncle Marshall, this is someone that him and my dad, they grew up together in Nigeria, all from childhood till they graduated high school. When they graduated high school, my Uncle Marshall came to America. And once he got here, he did everything in his power to get my dad over here, which he did. So yeah, thick as thieves, you know, besties. So around the time when I was like 5 or 6, I mean, my Uncle Marshall is always at the house, like was always at the house because him and my dad, they were young, so they were always like drinking, partying, all of that. And if my uncle was, you know, too drunk to drive, he would just be on our couch. He would fall asleep on our couch, whatever that may be. He was always there. Even if they weren't going out and it was just late, he would just, like, I just knew, like, Uncle Marshall, he'd be on the couch. He'd be asleep on the couch. One thing, though, that I looked forward to whenever he did stay the night, even whenever he just came over, he really loved me and my siblings. Like, he would, if the ice cream truck was outside, he's the one, like, "Come on, let's go." Like, to go get us ice cream. He's always bringing over, like, sweets, candies, all of those things for us, presents, all of that. So, you know, anytime I know that he's there, I know that when he wakes up, we're going to get, like, some good stuff. But unfortunately, my uncle ended up getting cancer. And so I remember, again, around like age 5, 6, us going to the hospital to go see him. He was up, he was talking, like he was fine and all of that. And yeah, I just remember thinking, because I was so young, I wasn't really understanding like what cancer, I didn't know what cancer was. So to me, I'm like, okay, he's sick. I get that, but he's in the hospital, so he's going to be okay. You know, I didn't understand like any other
alternative to not being okay. So maybe like a week or two after the hospital visit, one night I wake up and, just want to go lay in my parents' bed. Just wanted to go lay with them. And so as I'm leaving my room, I am walking past the living room and I see Uncle Marshall on the couch. He's laying on the couch. And at first I wasn't sure if it was him because I didn't remember him coming over the night before. So I look closer and it's dark because it's nighttime. I look closer and then he looks up at me. And so I'm like, oh, that is Uncle Marshall. He looks up and he just like waves. And I'm like, and then I get excited because I'm like, oh yes, he's here. We're gonna get some good stuff in the morning. So I was kind of excited to see him. So after I did my wave, I kept going and went to my parents' room. So once I got in the bed, so I'm trying to squeeze in between my parents or whatever. And so it wakes up my dad. My dad wakes up and so I'm like trying to snuggle with him and I just tell him like, oh, Uncle Marshall is here. He's on the couch. And my dad's like, what? I was like, Uncle Marshall, he's on the couch. He was like, what are you talking about? And I'm trying to say it again because I'm confused. Like, are you not understanding me? Uncle Marshall's here. And as I'm saying that, literally the phone starts ringing. So my dad picks up the phone and it's literally the hospital letting him know that my Uncle Marshall had passed. So now my dad is like hysterical. He's waking up my mom. And they're both like saying, that he's gone. And I'm like, I'm still not getting it. I'm like, he's on the couch. And my dad keeps what am I talking about? We get up, we go into the living room. He's not there because he's at the hospital. Yeah. So my dad kept asking me like, what did you see? What did you see? I was like, I started getting scared. I'm like, I saw him. He waved at me. He was on the couch. Like, I was not getting it. So, yeah. So that was my first encounter seeing paranormal. Rest in peace, to my uncle. That was the last time I saw him. But apparently he did come back again to, like, other people. That's, like, a whole nother story. Like, if you're Nigerian, you already know it's a mess. It's a longer story, but that was my interaction. A lot of people were like, no, you might have dreamt it. But I was like, there was no reason. Why would I literally wake up out of my sleep, see him, wave at him, and 2 minutes later, we get the phone call that he's gone? I don't know, but creepy.
Creepiest things that have happened to me as a nurse, part 5. When I was an LPN, I worked at a nursing home at the beginning of my years, and we had this beloved resident that we called Jimmy, and he lived in 1A. And he would always go around and talk to us and say goodnight to us every single night. One day, Jimmy just beautifully died in his sleep. And then 3 days later, someone moved into his room and came out of his room the second and third night he was there and said, can you please tell Jimmy to get out of my room? He must be demented, and he keeps saying that this is his room, but this is my room, and can you please go in and talk to him? Me and the other CNA were super freaked out, and we did not go in the room. Finally, Dawn, one of the other CNAs on another wing, was like, I'll go in. No one was there.